Good morning, and welcome to the San Francisco Interfaith Council weekly online briefing for faith leaders. This week, we focus on transit in times of pandemic. This meeting is hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council and supported by the Joint Information Center of the San Francisco COVID Command Center. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. Audio, video, and chat will be monitored and recorded for record keeping, training, and quality assurance. By default, all participants will be muted and video turned off to minimize distractions. To submit a question or comment, select the chat button at the bottom of your screen and send a message to Q&A. They will be shared with the speakers and/or panelists after the meeting for response. Thank you. San Francisco is still experiencing a dangerous COVID-19 surge. You can take the following actions in order to save lives. Stay home as much as you can. Avoid gathering with people from outside your household, whether indoors or outdoors. When you must go out, make sure to wear a mask. 1 in 3 people with COVID have no symptoms, but can infect other people without knowing it. If you have been exposed to COVID-19 or have symptoms, follow guidelines about quarantining. Support is available by calling 628-217-6101 or by calling 311. Together, we will recover. You can save lives and stop the spread of COVID-19 by getting tested through your healthcare provider. If you have symptoms or have been exposed to COVID-19, but don't have health insurance or can't get tested through your provider, visit sf.gov/gettestedsf or call 311 for information on getting tested at a city-run testing location. Thank you. And now I will turn the meeting over to the Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Michael Pappas. Michael, the floor is yours.
Sharon, thank you very much. And thank you to our amazing tech team at the Joint Information Center for all that you've done for the past 35 programs that we have produced. Good morning, I'm Michael Pappas, and on behalf of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, I want to welcome you to this morning's online briefing for faith leaders. As a transit-first city, San Francisco is committed to lowering carbon emissions, encouraging travel by cycling and public transportation, and minimizing the use of automobiles. Of the many sectors dramatically impacted by the coronavirus, transit in our city has not been exempt from the pandemic's wide net of consequences. On January 23rd, the SFMTA restarted the T3rd Muni Metro rail service and increased bus service, including adding routes based on community feedback. As subway repairs continue, the San Francisco Municipal Transit Agency aims to keep phasing Muni Metro rail back into service. The agency also plans to increase service on its high ridership lines and use available vehicles and operators to help relieve crowding. This week's online briefing for faith leaders, hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council and supported by the COVID Command Center's Joint Information Center Virtual Outreach Team, welcomes San Francisco Municipal Transit Agency Public Information Officer Enrique Aguilar, who will offer an overview of this month's extended routes, increased frequencies, resumed service, and new bus lines as part of the agency's COVID-19 response strategy. And without further ado, and with great pleasure, I welcome the chairman of the board of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, friend and colleague, Kaushik Roy.
Let's try that again. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Michael. My name is Kaushik, and on behalf of our board of directors, I do want to extend a warm welcome to all of you. This is the first time we are gathering since we've had a change in federal government leadership, and as difficult and heartbreaking as we know the road will be in the months to come, I hope you all agree with me in feeling some sense of fortune and relief to know we finally have a government that is dedicated and taking this pandemic as seriously as possible. We have also at the Interfaith Council been very honored to be able to have this weekly presentation or conversation for all of you. As Michael mentioned, we had this conversation 35 times in 2020, and we will be here and continue to offer this as long as we need to, but of course we look forward to the time when we don't have to have these conversations to update you on the different aspects of the pandemic's impact on our city. For those of you who are joining us for the very first time, I want to extend a special warm welcome to you. Thank you. I hope this will not be your last time joining us as well. At the beginning of every Interfaith Council meeting or event, the Council likes to read its interfaith statement just as a way to ground ourselves and remind why we all come together as an interfaith community. This is an interfaith community. Whatever our individual belief, it can be freely expressed here with no apologies. If we are invited to offer a prayer in this setting, it should be offered according to the tradition with which we identify. If we are invited to speak on a subject from the perspective of our tradition, we are free to do so without fear of offending those who come from another tradition. We come together as people of faith to learn from each other that we might better understand the multiplicity of faith traditions in our city and in our world. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Kaushik, and thank you for your continued leadership over these many weeks and the commitment you've made to be a part of this program. We begin each of these programs with a reflective moment to ground us for the conversation to follow. It is a great joy to welcome my friend and brother, Fatih Ferdi Atis, the director of the Pacifica Institute, who has been a long-time board member of the San Francisco Interfaith Council. Fatih, please lead us in that reflective moment.
Good morning, Michael. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And salam, shalom, shanti, peace and blessings upon all of us. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Brothers and sisters, in these challenging times, it's important to remember and recognize how fragile lives we have. However, there is no need to despair or lack of hope because we have our God, the all-knowing, all-compassionate, and all-powerful. One verse in the Holy Quran reads that, "And when my servants ask you, O Muhammad, concerning me, indeed, I am near. I respond to the invocation of the supplicant when she calls upon me. So let them respond to me by obedience and believe in me that they may rightly guide it." God is near to all of us. Brothers and sisters, in an increasingly polarized world and under very tough situations of the pandemic, it can sometimes feel very hard to keep our hope and be positive. But God reminds us to be responsible and actively upholding and protecting high values such as love, compassion, justice, and taking care of the others. Let's stick with love. Let's stick with hope. I will leave you a short Islamic prayer. It's called a prayer of the salam, prayer of the peace. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam wa wahayya rabbana bisalam wa adkhilna daraka as-salam wa tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, creator of the all worlds. O Allah, you are the peace, and from you comes all peace. Make us to live by means of your peace, and bring us the place of your peace, your garden of peace. You are the one most glorious and the most generous. Ameen.
Thank you, Fatih. In all of the years we have known one another, I've known you to be the embodiment of peace and love. And so your words are an expression of the innermost peace and love in your heart. You bless us. Thank you.
Thank you.
A number of years ago, I received from the San Francisco Planning Department a spreadsheet and map with the 800 facilities owned by communities of faith and religious institutions in our city. We are everywhere. And as such, we are called to be good neighbors and good partners with city government on a number of the policies in which they are instituting, and to give important feedback. As defenders of the environment and good stewards, we also are supporters of this transit first policy of the city and county of San Francisco. Now, in the midst of this pandemic, the city faces a number of challenges, financial challenges, a looming debt of $140 million for this agency alone, and to encourage ridership so people will feel safe. We are very blessed to be collaborating with the San Francisco Municipal Transit Agency and to welcome today Enrique Aguilar, the Public Information Officer. Enrique, we are grateful to have you with us. We invite you to unmute and to give us an overview of the response measures to COVID-19 that the agency has taken and its vision for reopening transit in our city.
Yes, thank you. Should I begin the presentation, or do you want me to answer this question?
Begin the presentation. The floor is yours.
And once again, thank you all for the invitation. It's nice to be with you this morning to talk about the service changes that occurred last weekend. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, our ability to provide transit service has been limited in several ways. There are fewer operators available due to health and safety concerns. There are fewer vehicles available due to increased cleaning requirements. Additionally, the capacity of each vehicle is reduced due to physical distancing requirements. If you take a look at this map, this is what our core service plan looks like today. We started in March with 17 routes based on a number of factors rooted in equity. Return to service and overall transit resource allocation was based on several factors, including serving muni equity strategy routes in neighborhoods, connecting essential destinations, providing geographic distribution, and also looking into post-COVID ridership. So as you can see, some of the changes that happened last weekend include a new route. It's called the 15 Bayview Hunters Point Express that's serving Bayview Hunters Point, between Bayview Hunters Point and downtown. We also had some lines returning that included the 33 Ashbury T3rd. It's coming, or actually it came back to trains. It was being served by the T Metro bus. The 55 Dogpatch to Dogpatch, 27 Bryant on 7th and 8th. And then there's also modified routes to the modifications to the 22 Fillmore, the 37 Corbett, and 43 Masonic. The 1 California short has additional service between California at Presidio Streets and Clay at Drum Streets, where ridership is the highest. The 5 Fulton short has additional service between Fulton at 8th Avenue and the Salesforce Transit Center, where once again, ridership is highest. Some of our 14-hour Mission Rapid buses now end at Mission at Low Streets to relieve terminal congestion due to high frequency at Daly City BART station. The 30 Stockton has a short line between Caltrain and Van Ness Avenue at North Point, which added service in segments of the line that consistently experiences crowding. The route travels south on 4th Street, west on Harrison Street, south on 5th Street, then east on Townsend Street to its terminal. And then just to add for the additional service, the 8AX Bayshore 8 Express has additional service between Kearney Street at Pacific Avenue, where ridership is highest, instead of what it used to do during peak hours, which it was serviced during that time only. The 8AX is now in service all day in both directions. As I mentioned, the T3 trains are back. Temporarily modified, it was returned between Sunnydale and Embarcadero Station. This gave us back buses currently providing the temporary T3 Street bus service to increase bus service elsewhere. This change also brings more of our rail operators back to operating Muni Metro rail service. The 15 Bayview Hunters Point Express. This new route would connects the southeast neighborhoods of San Francisco to the downtown area near Market and 3rd Street. The 15 Express expresses along most of the route north of Bayview neighborhood, with the exception of stopping at transfer points to routes connecting to the Mission neighborhood. It serves customers that live in the Bayview and Hunters Point neighborhoods to downtown with a quicker trip. Community members were able to weigh in their preferred route from 3 alternatives generated by the 15 Bayview Hunters Point working group through an online survey. The 3 alternatives are not on the map, but the one that was chosen is, and it was alternative C, which is from downtown to 3rd Street and Palou into Hunters Point. So I want to talk about the outreach, just because there was a lot of community engagement that went through despite having barriers due to not having in-person meetings and being able to collaborate in that matter. However, we did, as I mentioned, we had a working group and we conducted outreach in the summer and fall of 2020. There was also coordination with Supervisor Walton's office in District 10. The project kickoff basically was at the Resilient Bayview on July 10th. We had meetings with Bayview Hunters Point working group. And we also have a page with more of the details of who was part of this, who participated. In addition to engaging the group, we also went out to the streets in the Bayview. We distributed over 200 project flyers, and just encourage community customers in the Bayview to take our survey and just have an opinion on how the express route should look like. So we did door-to-door outreach along 3rd Street, talking to businesses as well. The 55 Dogpatch. This is part of the 16th Street Improvement Project. It's a permanent Muni Forward project that is currently underway. It involves construction of dedicated transit lanes, wider sidewalks at bus stops, and extension of the overhead contact system, also known as the OCS, that powers the electric trolley buses along 16th Street between Church and 3rd Streets, and the reroute of the 22 Fillmore. The 22 Fillmore realignment would, it basically runs on 16th Street between Kansas and 3rd Streets, and between 3rd Street and Mission Bay Boulevard North, where the new terminal is located near the 4th Street. Given the recent completion of phase 1 of the 16th Street Improvement Project from Potrero Avenue to 3rd Street. The 22 Fillmore is anticipated to be rerouted in this month. The 55 Dogpatch was rerouted to serve as a transit connection between 16th Street corridor and the Dogpatch Potrero Hill neighborhoods that were previously served by the 22 Fillmore. With the onset of the pandemic and the recent completion of the project, the 55 reroute is proposed on a temporary emergency basis to provide this critical service connection to essential services for the Dogpatch Potrero Hill neighborhoods. The 55 Dogpatch reroute runs from 16th Street and Mission Street to 20th Street and 3rd Street. The route travels on 16 between Mission and Connecticut Streets, on Connecticut Street between 16th and 20th Streets, on 20th Street between Connecticut and Pennsylvania Streets, on Pennsylvania Street between 20th and 22nd Streets, and on 22nd Streets between Pennsylvania and 3rd Streets. This route alignment makes use of the existing terminal currently used by the 22 Fillmore on 20th and 3rd Streets. The 27 Bryant returned to service as a temporarily modified route with travel on 7th and 8th Streets. This modified route uses temporary emergency transit lanes to improve service reliability and build on the foundation of the 27 Bryant Transit Reliability Project. The 27 now travels on 7th and 8th, and as I mentioned, it takes advantage of the new temporary emergency transit lanes that are also used by the 19. On the map, you can also see that we highlighted some of the grocery stores that are near the line. It's to name a few, it goes by Foodsco, Costco, Trader Joe's, and a few others along the route. And then I do want to talk about what happened also in the fall. As you might already recall, on December 19th, we made some modifications to the J Church. And so the graphic on this slide represents the temporary changes planned for implementation in late fall as phase 2, which happened, like I said, on December 19th. In the fall, we built new temporary accessible platforms on Church Street, just south of Dubose on the existing inbound island, and at a new outbound stop on Church Street, south of Market, next to Verve Coffee. This new temporary stop would extend the sidewalk next to Verve Coffee to provide a seamless transfer to the train from Church Street Station. Implemented in August 2020, the blue indicates where trains will stop for able-bodied passengers, and the green indicates where accessible ramps will be constructed for trains to stop to accommodate anyone who needs accessible path to the station. Implementing these requires some more changes to curb space and walk through each change. And this is at West Portal, as the slide shows.
Enrique, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just a quick question before we move on to our community faith panelists. What have been some of the, this is a pretty extensive increase in service. What are you all doing to encourage ridership in this time of COVID? Now that the programs and the lines are being increased.
Yeah, so there's many plans to bring back ridership. One of them is to just demonstrate the way that we're cleaning our vehicles. We also continue to hear feedback from customers that they want service in certain areas. And so just making sure that we're listening to Muni customers and providing service where it's needed. And an example of it is the 27 Bryant. There was strong advocacy from groups like Tenderloin People's Congress and other community-based organizations that were asking us to provide service for, in particular for seniors and people with disabilities. And so what we're doing is providing service where we're doing everything possible in our service planning to make sure that these areas are covered in the same way, having plans to, for example, have our stations with more cleaning, having different set of requirements to be able to ensure that our vehicles are cleaned more frequently, and that when they leave their division, that that they're also clean, and that customers feel safe in them. And we're also, part of our campaign is also to remind customers that they should wear face coverings when entering buses. Also making sure that we have, if we have, for example, a crowded bus, that our operators are instructed to basically pass up a person, just to make sure that there's enough space to socially or physically distance inside a vehicle.
You answered 3 more questions. I just, having worked with the MTA, I know that increase in service like this goes through exhaustive community outreach, as well as deliberation and planning. How long have you been working on this particular increase in service? I want to congratulate you, because it seems like that vulnerable communities are being better served.
Thank you. Yes, and I mean, it takes a lot of planning behind the scenes. We started Metro service in August, and unfortunately, there was a few issues that forced us to return Metro buses to serve Metro lines, and we're thinking strategically, and also making sure that our operators, our customers, are safe while doing this at the same time.
I'm going to ask one difficult question. With looming budget cuts, and I know every city department's going to have to make them, how will staff cuts impact service and the ability to provide service for the residents of the city who want to take public transportation?
I mean, it is a difficult question, and it's one of those issues, budget cuts that would impact the way we're able to staff, for example, the cleaning crew. The pandemic, and in order to be able to serve our customers safely, we need more car cleaners. We also need the staff to bring back the service. And so it's a difficult question to answer, but it definitely would also force us to have less service. And we don't want that, because we've been listening to customers and they want, a full restoration of what pre-COVID Muni looked like. And so having staff cuts, limits our ability to bring back service to its full potential.
I know that your expertise has been on this increase, and I'm asking you questions now that perhaps may go beyond conversations that you've been having. But I'm guessing that since your operators on the street are essential workers, that every precaution is being taken to ensure their safety and health.
Yeah, that's right. And so again, we just want to make sure that we have the tools and that we have the right plan to make sure that we bring back service safely for customers and our essential employees, which includes the car cleaners, our operators that are every day waking up to, to just do their lines and happy to do it. So just one example of it, this last weekend, I saw on social media, which was very heartwarming, a group of 37 Corvette riders welcoming the 37. And so, these kind of gestures mean a lot to not just the agency, but our operators that are always on the front lines doing the job and getting people to essential destinations. So it's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Enrique. You're going to be getting some more questions shortly. I wanted to, at this point, introduce some of our community panelists. We call them faith panelists. I started off my introduction to you by mentioning that, folks in the faith community are good partners with the SFMTA, and you'll see that in the expertise that they are advocating for. And so we've asked three particular individuals who are advocates in three different areas related to transit to talk about how the COVID has impacted their particular work, and then to ask a question of you, which I'm sure you'll ably be able to respond to. Let's start off with John Alex Lowell. He is a steering committee member for San Francisco Bay Area Families for Safe Streets. I've known John for a very long time. I believe, if memory serves me correctly, he is a congregant at First Congregational Church, which shares its space with the Metropolitan Community Church. John has had firsthand experience with the issue of safe streets. And we were having some audio trouble earlier. I'm hoping that that's been rectified. John, are you there? Perhaps not. John? We will keep an eye out for him, and if he's able to get back online, we were having audio problems earlier. We will bring him into the queue. Moving right along, we will now turn to Leor Milgrom Gartner, Northern California Director for California Interfaith Power and Light. She is a congregate at The Kitchen, which is a unique congregation in the Mission. And I've worked with Leor on many, many occasions. Anytime there is anything that has to do with interfaith and the environment, we turn to California Interfaith Power and Light. Leor, it is a joy to re-welcome you to this program. You were with us the last time when we had Jeff Tumlin, the director of the SFMTA, on the program. Would you kick it off and please share with us how COVID has impacted you and your programs, and the challenges and the triumphs, and then pose a question to our good friend Enrique.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. So we're now into the 11th month, I think, of this here in San Francisco, and I work with California Interfaith Power and Light. We work with congregations and houses of worship and people of faith and conscience across California on addressing the moral and crisis of the climate. We are fully aware that climate is changing around us. It was caused by humans. And we as people of faith and conscience need to respond. We need to respond for our neighbors, for ourselves, and for the future generations. And it's been an interesting year in this regard, because 2020 is over. We've entered now a new year. And in looking back, we see that the forced behavior changes that we've all had to do, right? So we're working from home. This is my dining room. Houses of worship have done the same thing. We continue to meet, we continue to pray, we continue to gather, but from our home. And so as we look back at 2020, as in regards to the climate crisis, one of the things we've seen is there has been a drop of global climate pollution. Our emissions reductions have been significant for the first time in many, many years. And it's a whopping 7% reduction, which in the scheme of the world is very significant. And why that's so relevant right here and for this conversation is that that reduction in emissions basically comes from transportation. As we've been staying at home, we haven't been driving, we haven't been flying. Our climate pollution has decreased because of that. And so that's positive. It's, on one hand, it's something to celebrate as we think about the state of the world. It's something to celebrate as we think about our own lives and the changes and sacrifices we've had to make. That's complicated because we miss seeing one another. We miss going to family events. My nephew just had his bar mitzvah here in San Francisco, and it was a Zoom affair with just a few people distanced in a backyard. So we're missing being together. And yet the world is seeing a moment of repair. And so we're holding both of those things. So today we're together in this great conversation. Thank you, Michael, and everybody else. Thank you, Enrique. It's also today is the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat. And is the 15th day of the month of Shvat. And historically, kind of biblically, it is a day that that the Jewish community, and I myself am Jewish, count the cycle of the trees, right? There are biblical laws that relate to the age of trees. So today is the day is the birthday of the trees. It's hard to notice in the gray of San Francisco, but trees are starting to blossom. The plum trees are blossoming in the Central Valley. The almond trees are blossoming. Like California, so is Israel. So this is the day that is being celebrated for the Jewish community. It's also within the Jewish community, kind of contemporary times have had it. It is the day that we celebrate the environment. So it is a day of, there's climate action happening, there is learning, there's the big bold Jewish climate fest that's happening across America. So it's fitting that I get to be with all of you today. But how do I get to my question? Enrique, your presentation was fabulous about the exciting of the renewal. So it's not just the renewal of trees, it's the renewal of the SFMTA this week. I myself live about 50 feet from the 33 line, and it has been quiet for so many months. And so I have been celebrating, right, as the buses are going by, and there are even people inside. It's really great to see that this is a tiny taste of the city waking up. But moving forward, as we begin to wake up from COVID and begin to resume travel and normalcy, kind of my question to you is, how do we also hold on to the reductions, these emission reductions, the simplicity in life that we've created over the last year? We do not want to return to the status quo of a year ago. We do not want to have congestion downtown. We do not want to have climate pollution, people looking for parking. So how do we kind of take the transportation learnings of this last year of reducing and simplifying and carrying it forward even when we don't have this fear of transmission of the virus?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And yeah, you brought up a good point. Like the city has been sort of dormant, but then it's also, it's been a great time for the environment to heal. And so I do want to talk about some of the programs that we have, such as Slow Streets, and like some of the programs that are actually encouraging people to, use different modes of transportation. And those modes, aside from transit, that includes using bikes, walking instead of taking an Uber, for example, or taking, just using vehicles instead of doing that. And I think kind of learning lessons from during COVID, is an important thing, especially for environment. Now, speaking on transit, we do have, we did make a commitment 5 years ago, and I think that we're still working towards making sure that we have zero emission fleet by 2035. I know it seems like a long time from now, but I do think that that's going to, also thinking of it and planning ahead of time will help us make sure that we reach our goal of reducing ourselves as a transit agency emission, and just continue to, also fund programs like I mentioned, Slow Streets and others that give people the opportunity to go outside in their own streets without the congestion or the traffic that, that existed pre-COVID.
Excellent. I don't do this often, but I'm going to ask a question of Lior, because, and I'm going to ask you to, Lior, in your response, to be shameless. How's that? I'm guessing that you are encouraged by the new direction of the new administration when it comes to the environment and environmental policies. How does your organization feel supported by those things, and how will that make you a better partner with the MTA in your work?
So many things to say. With the new administration, the world has indeed changed, and we are now, we Americans, we Californians can engage in climate and on policy in a way that a year ago we nearly forgot was an option. As it relates, as it kind of trickles down to San Francisco, and in conversation with the SFMTA, you talk about the budgetary shortfall. We should be seeing significant money coming in to support public transportation. And the new Secretary of Transportation, Buttigieg, is an advocate of slow streets and all of the things that Enrique just mentioned. And part of solving the climate crisis is a willingness to see things differently, to go beyond the personal vehicle and shift America in that way. And there's two ways that that's going to happen, and the administration is suggesting that they'll support both of these. One is the incredibly critical, if we are going to be in a car or even in a bus, it's going to have to be clean. It's going to have to be electric or some other zero emission type of vehicle. The other is our behavior is going to have to change, and we have to get out of our cars. And to have a leader in Washington, D.C. who acknowledges that, who's willing to take the risks and kind of lead the way and ask people to do something daring, I think will trickle down to how we can be partners in this as well. But I will say that California Interfaith Power and Light is part of a network of over 40 state affiliates of Interfaith Power and Light organizations across the country. And we advocate as well around policies. We have chosen to not spend most of our advocacy efforts on the local and state level. And there's the Bay Area is an incredible place to do that, because absolutely, I do like to think that so goes the Bay Area, so goes San Francisco, right? So goes California, and so goes California, so goes the nation. And we see that with the fuel standards around cars. Hopefully we'll see that around policies like slow streets and public transit. So we will, even with the new administration, California Interfaith Power and Light will still be progressive advocates for really strong policies at the local level and within California, because the federal government is, cutting edge for where it can be, but California can be doing even more. And so we need to keep pushing that bar higher and higher.
Thank you. I thought that question might excite you, and thank you for that wonderful and animated response. There's that expression, it's one thing to talk the talk, but it's another thing to walk the walk. now we're going to talk about Bike the Bike. We are very, very fortunate to have with us today the Deputy Director of the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, Rahul Young, who happens to be a congregant at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of San Francisco, and his father is a Unitarian minister. We've worked very, very closely with the Bicycle Coalition. It just seems that congregants like to bike. And so several years ago, we partnered with the Bicycle Coalition and in starting Bike to Worship Week, which was really a great success and encouraged us to get people to worship in different ways and heighten that consciousness. Rahul, we welcome you, and we're hoping that you can shed a light on your work, how COVID has impacted your work, and then pose a question to our presenter, Enrique Aguilar.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael, and good to be with all of you. And yes, as Michael said, my father was a Unitarian minister, and I like to think that by being a leader of a progressive nonprofit in San Francisco, committed to justice and sustainability, it's my way of being a little bit close to a Unitarian minister without actually having to go to divinity school and do all the hard work like that. So great to be intersecting with the interfaith group here too. Yeah, as you would expect, certainly our organization has seen both kind of challenges and opportunities as a result of COVID. So, I mean, of course, the challenges include, we're a member-based organization with 10,000 strong members, but of course, given the churn in San Francisco and many people leaving, we've seen major impacts with that in terms of our community changing and slipping away in certain ways. Just anecdotally seeing the mailers we have get sent back because of so many people changing addresses. And then of course, certainly not being able to hold events, whether it be Bike to Work Day or Winterfest or things that we've been doing for decades as a way to kind of create community. We've had to pivot to virtual arenas as well, which we've been able to make the best of, but there's still no replacement for in-person time. So there are real challenges, of course. At the same time, there have been true opportunities, and I suspect many of you have seen versions of that. So we see the statistics anecdotally, tremendous numbers of people throughout San Francisco are biking in a way that they never have before, right? There are so many stories of bike shops having lines out the door for people to be able to get their bikes fixed, people dusting off bikes that have been in their garage or in the back closet for 10 years and getting it out there, partly because it feels like the safest way to be able to get around the city, and the quickest too, and of course, sustainable. This has been especially true for families, I would say. So I have two daughters, a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I love raising my kids in San Francisco, but certainly it's always been attention to try to figure out how we can move around safely for them too, and how they can be independent, but able to get around on their bikes safely. And so that's been a tremendous need for families throughout San Francisco, even before the pandemic, but especially now as school in many cases has been virtual. That's certainly been the case for us. But we wanted to be around, we wanted to be able to be outside, but to do so safely in a socially distanced way. So I think we've seen a major transformation in San Francisco, things like the Great Highway being closed, things like Golden Gate Park being car-free, things like Twin Peaks being car-free. And then of course, the slow streets and shared spaces initiatives that Enrique has referred to. There now are tremendous numbers of additional outdoor spaces where people throughout San Francisco, and especially families, are able to be outside safely. And that's been great. And we've seen, as a result, major new constituencies grow up to truly support our work. I think whereas in the past, people might have thought of the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition as a group of, white middle-aged dudes in spandex who bike in Marin all the time, it's much more diverse, it's much more powerful, and that's led to real changes in San Francisco. So that's been great. It's a huge opportunity. The big question for us now in 2021 is, as we start to make our way out of the pandemic, are we going to revert back to the way things were before? So these have been great adaptations to the pandemic, but there need to be long-term transformations for the city. This is not just about social distancing for now. This is about making the city a truly sustainable and more livable place going forward. So, we are starting to hear, bits of positive news from the MTA around taking some of the slow streets like Sanchez and Shotwell and making them permanent. That's a great step. We'll hear more about the shared spaces initiatives becoming more permanent. That's great. But there are still questions around, will the Great Highway revert back to kind of the car-focused space it was before? Will Golden Gate Park become car-focused again too? And I think we really believe with our hearts that to truly have San Francisco be the city we want it to be, sustainable, healthy for all San Franciscans, we need to really be focused on locking in some of the positive changes we've made and make sure that continues to be the case for the city going forward, especially recognizing that as we move out of the pandemic, transit, no matter what we do, is going to be a lagging mode for lots of people. There's going to be a huge chunk of people who don't feel safe immediately going into transit, no matter what we do. So we want to work to kind of encourage people to get into transit, but also recognize there needs to be this bridge to make sure that as people start to go back to the office or to other spaces, to schools, that they can be on their bikes to do so and to feel confident in doing so safely. So my question for Enrique, building off of Lior's question, is for things like Golden Gate Park, the Great Highway, what do you see as the greatest challenges that would prevent us from continuing the positive steps that we've seen over the last year?
Yeah, great question. And I mean, it's one of those, just having experience with community engagement, I think that the biggest challenge is just making sure that this behavior of realizing that there's more than just vehicles to transportation, that, you know, that we extend, for example, that we continue our work on expanding our bike lanes, making sure that also if we do have bike lanes, that, you know, that we ensure the safety of cyclists and families that utilize them. And just like you mentioned, slow streets and shared spaces, also working on making them permanent. And that's where the challenge is, making sure that we have everyone at the table and that we can come to, I mean, it's basically coming to compromise of like what is best for everyone. And then sometimes making the case for why we need it, aside from physically distancing. In reality, like the change that we saw during the pandemic, emissions, you know, way lower than ever before, just making, you know, the case. And I think that, you know, it starts from the federal level. And I think that it's promising to realize that we have people in elected offices that see an issue of continuing in the same path of you know, just not realizing that we can use bikes, so that we can walk. And for the SFMTA as a transportation agency, just making sure that these modes of transportation are safe and reliable for people to use. Hope I answered your question. It was a tough one.
Thank you, Enrique and Rahul. You know, one of the items unfinished items on our agenda is to work with the Bicycle Coalition to set up a whole network of bicycle safety programs in our congregations throughout the city. And so please share that with the leadership at the coalition. We are committed to it, and it will be for the betterment of the city, certainly. Enrique, I am going to take a liberty, if you don't mind. And I couldn't help, I'm falling to temptation right now. I saw my friend Lulu Feliciano, your colleague at the agency, on the line, and I just wanted to invite her on and say hello to her and just ask her if she had any reflections on anything she heard here, or wanted to compliment Enrique's wonderful presentation. Unmute Lulu. Let's see.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to join you all this morning. And Enrique is one of our stellar public information officers. I mean, this guy was posting signs at 2:30 in the morning on Saturday to make sure that all our signs are up there. I mean, talk about public service dedication. And a lot of us were out there Saturday to make sure that things would run smoothly. I just want to add to a few things that Enrique had already addressed. And one is about our budget. Everyone is clearly struggling right now, but with the new administration, they passed funding support for transportation agencies. So we're going to get some support actually as soon as next week, Wednesday, I believe, or it was yesterday. The days start to meld now. So but it was a Wednesday, they said. That actually takes us through June 30 of 2021. We are going to need more support for the next fiscal year of through June 30 of 2022. And we may be needing your support actually, because the way it's been done before is the support is only for capital projects to build stuff. There is no support and regular funding to operate the service. So we are looking at ways to fix that funding gap that our agency has had for many years. So I'm sure we'll have discussions with your group about that and how we can all work together and support that. And then one of the things we really learned from COVID is that, like Enrique said, the environment's enjoying it, and so are we. You know, the air quality is so much better. But we know that eventually, as we wake up and slowly return to some sort of normalcy, we're learning that the new transit lanes we've put in have really helped, especially essential workers. We know that neighborhoods are loving slow streets. We know that you can't buy a bicycle. In fact, it's so hard to find a bicycle now when cycling, especially in good weather. So we are looking at ways to rethink how people travel, how people get around, and what is best for both the environment and for our residents and visitors. So there's a lot being discussed. I'm sure we'll be back to have those discussions with this group, but we appreciate the continued support that Michael, your organization, gives us. And I don't know what else to add. Oh, one exciting thing, it's a project that I'm working on, is we are getting ready to test all electric vehicles. And this is not sexy work. The sexy work is when we do the ribbon cutting and the buses roll down the street, but as simple as the chargers, that to me is getting those fundamentals in place so we can have electric vehicles. Is, believe it or not, is exciting for me, who does this work. So we're getting ready to do that, and we'll make sure we'll keep your group updated on all these, maybe not super sexy implementations, but they all build up and help, support the environment and our customers and the public. Thank you, Michael, for the space to speak.
Thank you, dear Lulu. And Enrique, thank you for, I know you're doing this on your holiday, so we appreciate you taking the time, but we also appreciate all that you put into getting our system back up and running and expanded. So thank you, and thank you to our friends at the San Francisco Municipal Transit Agency. To Leora and Rahul, thank you very, very much. I look forward to working with both of you in the time to come, because what each of you is doing is really a part of the work of the San Francisco Interfaith Council. I'm so sorry John Alex Lowell was unable to connect, and we look forward to welcoming him back at a future time. As we're saying thank yous, I want to say a very special thank you to San Francisco Interfaith Council Administrative Program Associate Cynthia Zambucas. I know a lot of people on the line are getting multiple email blasts that are helping them to make informed decisions on the part of their congregants' health and safety and protection. Without Cynthia's technical and discerning help, that would not be happening, and she is just an invaluable member of our staff. Also want to say a very special thank you to the COVID Command Center's Joint Information Center Virtual Outreach Team, the real unsung heroes that have enabled this program to continue. To John McKnight, we want to say a very special thank you. He is our Community Partners Group Coordinator and also the Treasurer of the Interfaith Council. To Trey Russell Allen, who is the Virtual Outreach Team Coordinator, to Elisa Karawali, who's been producing these programs weekly for some time, and of course to our own Sharon Walton, who is the lead, who has just been an invaluable member of the team. We'd like to invite you all to join us next week for a very special briefing at which time we will introduce San Francisco's newly appointed health officer, Dr. Susan Phillips. As many of you know, Dr. Aragon, who is the health officer, has become the state's health officer. And Dr. Phillips succeeds him, and we are looking forward to her report on this new phase of the pandemic in which we find ourselves, anticipation of the vaccine and other areas. So with that, we conclude our program. We thank you for being with us. Many of you have been with us these many weeks and months, and we ask your continued participation so that you can be well informed. God bless you and God keep you.